from the University of Kentucky are going to come over and talk about iNet and also some of their commercialization efforts. We'll do a little SEO digital marketing course with Awesome Inc. after that they offer, and then we'll go take a deep breath and have some beer over at Country Boy Brewing. The owner and that local brewery is going to join us. So we got a good day. Welcome in the back. There's waters, there's Nutri-Grain bars, some fruit snacks, and some candies. Everybody welcome and have as much as you want. So with that, I introduce Mr. Host here. As you know, and in the emails, it's going to be very intimate, relaxed setting the whole day. Conversational Q&A back and forth. Everybody's here for different reasons, has different interests. I met Mr. Hope through the BEAM initiative. My friend Grant Mills and I kind of went to him and asked, how are young professionals being involved with that? And through that, we started a young group, kind of connected Louisville, Frankfurt, and Lexington, and that group remains. It's been pretty interesting. And out of that is, you'll hear later, Awesome Inc. One of those things that the Code Academy is kind of a little bit of a brainchild that they've developed and run with. But Mr. Host is known for a number of things, growing businesses, probably the most notable Host Communications, which was sold to IMG, a lot of work at the University of Kentucky, and most recently, Louisville. He is the reason the Yum Center was developed, and I would argue that with anyone. So from Louisville, you probably have some questions, interest about that. It's been in the headlines recently, in regards to financial stuff. But with that, Mr. Host, thank you for being here, and I guess if you'd like to say a few things to us, and then we'll have some conversation. Thank you.
15 minutes ahead of time is on time, and on time is late. I have operated all my life that way. Anybody's got a cell phone, I'll turn it off. If I see anybody with looking at their phones or looking at anything during the course of the time I'm spending, I don't care what you do with anybody else. But in terms of mine, if I'm going to take my time to come and visit with you, then I expect you to give me the respect back at the same time. I had a rule in my business that if anybody had their cell phone on, it went off, they were fired. So guess what? That never happened. And one young lady made a mistake of having her phone on in her pocketbook, sitting behind her thing, and it went off. And she burst out crying, thinking she was going to get fired. And I said, let that be lesson one. It's your first strike. Don't get 3 strikes. I have 2 rules of business. Just 2 rules. Number 1, do not lie or misrepresent about anything. If you lie or misrepresent about anything, then you're fired. You don't get a second chance. Number 2, do not cheat 5 cents on an expense account. Do not steal. And I know every trick. So if you are guilty of stealing or cheating on an expense account, or cheating in terms of stealing of any kind, or 2, if you misrepresent, meaning you misrepresent to a client, to any individual in any way, shape, or form, you are immediately fired. I ran all my businesses all years the same way. Now, somebody had a drug problem, had an alcohol problem, had a problem with their wife or their spouse, had a problem otherwise, they always had second chances. I rehabilitated more people. I had, over a period of time, I don't know, I've got 4,000 or 5,000 alumni out there. And I rehabilitated more people and gave them second chances when they became addicted. And then they came back and they had to take drug tests once a week. And we ran random drug tests, and we said on a random drug test, we're going to get ready to do this. Now, if anybody's got an issue, you better let us know, and we'll give you a second chance. And you'd be surprised how many we flushed out as a result of that. So therefore, we ran a pretty clean environment for better than 30 years. I also believe that you've got to enjoy every single day that you live in this world. I have an expression that I use. I can't sleep fast enough because I love every minute of every day. I just turned 76. My wife is 74. I get up every morning at 4 o'clock. I've been getting up every morning at 4 o'clock every single day of my life. I never set an alarm in my life. If I'm in the West Coast, I wake up at 4 o'clock. If I'm overseas, I wake up at 4 o'clock. There's an alarm in my head that goes off and says it's time to go. Now, that doesn't mean I go to bed at midnight either. It means that I don't see very many second halves of games that start at 9 o'clock. 80% of every sale is in preparation. 20% is in presentation. If you are not prepared for doing what you're about to do, you cannot succeed. Too many people, whether it's young or medium age or old, make the mistake of going in and thinking they can wow somebody with a presentation. They know enough about it, and they are not prepared. You have to know more about the subject than the person you're presenting to. I come from the age of no computers. Think about this. My company, which was called Host Communications, first was called Jim Host and Associates, and there were no associates. Started in 1971. My background is I went to UK on the first athletic scholarship they ever gave in baseball. My mother comes from a family of 15, my dad from a family of 5. I have 71 first cousins. I'm the first person on either side of my family ever to go to college. Think about that. After World War II, 1% of the nation's population were college graduates. All right, so think about the era that I came from. Hardworking people, I'm from Eastern Kentucky, hardworking people, but absolutely no education other than high school education, and most of them didn't even have high school education. My mother was from a family of 15. She had 11 sisters. She was one of 12 sisters and 3 brothers. So if you just think about, and they weren't Catholic. So if you think about that, and you think about the heritage and the background of what drives you. So I came to school on first athletic scholarship. I had one sport coat to my name, an old white flannel coat. Had never been used to wearing a tie, and the only way I could get here was to take the train from Ashland and ride the train and then walk from the train station, which was right over here on Vine Street, and walk up to the campus. I walked everywhere. Never had a car in my life until my first year of pro baseball, after I graduated from UK. So I give you that background as a little bit of background of what drives me, and what still to this day continues to drive me, and why, if I can, I never refuse an opportunity to talk. Everybody's younger than I am, so to talk to a group of young people. So please don't think that I'm trying to preach to you today, because I'm not. I just want to relate to you some of the lessons learned over a period of time from what I would classify as a school of hard knocks. So I came here in 1955 to school. I was president of my junior and senior classes in high school. We had a high school class, a senior class of 347 in Ashland, and every day I walked a mile from my house to the corner at South 29th and thumbed to school. That's how I got to school. I passed, we call it passed papers. I passed papers every morning, which was income. My dad didn't make enough money to cause me to be able to have enough money to buy books at school, so I had to make my own. I worked at the YMCA in my junior and senior years in high school for 60 cents an hour, and worked 40 hours a week, played 3 sports, was president of the junior and senior classes, and yet still had enough time because of my total, and this is another lesson learned, total focus on making sure you separate out what's the 5 most important things you're going to do each day. What's the 5 most important things you're going to do next week, and what's the 5 most important things you're going to do in 2014, what's the 5 most important things you're going to get done in January. Every single day when I get up, I take a blank legal pad and I put down in order, what's the 5 most important things I got to do today. And I put the toughest thing first. Fire XYZ. Obviously, the normal thing is that you wait until 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, because, no. You do the toughest thing first every day, because it's always going to be on your mind. throughout the day. And if you made up your mind that you're going to do, and I use fire, and that's wrong, but whatever the toughest thing is, put the toughest thing first, the second toughest thing second, the third toughest thing third, and make sure that when that day's finished that you've accomplished the 5 most important things for the day. So I don't have much tolerance for people around me that say they're going to do something that's important, and then it doesn't get done during that particular day, which is kind of how I drove the companies. It is either black or white. If it's gray, it's in the other guy's favor. Think about that one. It's either black or white. That's why I never had the first lawsuit against my company in over 30 plus years of business. It's either black or it's white. If it's gray, it's in the other person's favor. Put yourself in the other person's shoes and say, what would I do if I'm sitting in the shoes and I have this presentation? On the other hand, make sure that you make the business proposition proper for you. And if it's not proper for him, then he's going to say it's not proper for him or her. But it's either black or it's white. If it's gray, it's in their favor. All right? That's very important. There are so many people who operate in the gray area and thinking that I'm going to take advantage of X, Y, Z. One of my rules of running our business was you never take advantage of anybody else. I don't want anybody taking advantage of us. Under promise and over deliver on everything you do. Under promise and over deliver. Don't make a commitment that I'm going to get X, Y, Z done by X and then not do it. It's better to say I'm going to do X, Y, Z by X and then over deliver on that promise. But I'm going to tell you one thing. You will fail in business and in life if you don't have passion for what you do. If you don't like what you do, and if you're not fully engaged in what you do, and you're not passionate about what you do, you will fail. If it's just a job, if you're not passionate about it, if you're not fully engaged in it, then you will fail. And all of the entrepreneurs in the world, a lot of entrepreneurial things have been great ideas, make a lot of sense, but they fail because the owner, the driver, doesn't have passion, or he or she is not able to communicate passion about what they do. To me, the biggest single rule I've always looked at hiring a person is that a positive attitude for a person is more important than a talent with no attitude or a bad one. You have to want to, not have to. I will take 5 people with great attitudes and beat 5 Michael Jordans of business every day of the week. You give me 5 people with great attitudes, want to, passion, attitudes. I can walk into a room and I can tell by the body language whether somebody's in it or they're not in it. I will be able to tell you when this is over with who was in this and who wasn't in this room. So the point is that you've got to have the ability of being able to make absolutely certain that if you do not have people engaged with you in your business that have good attitudes, do not tolerate bad attitudes. If there's a bad attitude and bad body language in a senior management meeting, I immediately stop the meeting, ask the person if they'll go outside the room and say, what's wrong? Now sometimes the bad attitude and bad body language is a personal issue they have with their spouse or their significant other. Sometimes it has to do with an issue having to do with an illness of a family member. You don't know. But the point is, give them a chance to rectify it and make sure they know you're recognizing that. And as leaders in business, you've got to have the ability of understanding that with people. Never go to bed mad. Think about that one. Think about that one. Never go to bed mad. I have been married to the greatest single individual in this world for 24 years. I made a horrible mistake my first time around. And she and I have never gone to bed mad. If there is an issue that is bothering her, I can immediately tell. If there's an issue bothering me, she can immediately tell. And we have a conversation and then hug each other before we go to sleep. Never go to bed mad. Never go to bed mad at somebody in your business. Never go to bed mad about something that happened during the course of the day. Never go to bed mad. Find humor in every day. I love good stories. I kept this, and I've never used this one before. But you all get those things that come on the internet all the time where people are sending stuff to you that have to do with humor, and you think, that's horrible. You know? Well, every once in a while, one comes across, and if I want to really get myself knocked off of a perch, you know, where I think I'm more superior than anybody, I think I'm more this than anybody, this is why I love this story. This is from an old farmer's words of wisdoms that we can all live by. Your fences need to be horse high, pig tight, and bull strong. Keep skunks and bankers at a distance. Life is simpler when you plow around a stump. A bumblebee is considerably faster than a John Deere tractor. Words that soak into your ears are whispered and not yelled. Meanness just don't happen overnight. Forgive your enemies. It messes up their heads. That may be the best thing I've said, because there isn't anybody that goes through life that says, why is that person upset at me? Why can't I get along with that person? Well, I've always operated on the basis that I figure out a way to kill them with kindness. And so forgive your enemies. It messes up their heads. Do not corner something that you know is meaner than you. Think about that one. It doesn't take a very big person to carry a grudge. I think about, I'll get back into my family history a little bit, but I think about carrying a grudge. Well, good Lord, if I'd carried grudges all this time for everything I've been involved in, I would have died an old, disheveled. Happy Chandler, you all know who Happy Chandler was, right? So he was a governor of Kentucky. He only two-time governor of Kentucky that wasn't in succession. He ran in 36 and won, and he ran in 55 and won. And in between, he was commissioner of baseball, responsible for Jackie Robinson, being the first African-American baseball player in the major leagues. Did a huge amount for this state, and one of the truly great characters of modern Western world. I'm a young cabinet secretary in Louis Nunn's administration in 1967. I had just gotten there. And Happy, a Democrat, had supported Louis, a Republican, to be the first Republican governor in 40 years in state government. So I get a call. I was one of 9 cabinet officers, and I was the one probably closest to the governor, and yet I was the youngest by far in the cabinet. So there was a phone on my credenza, and it was just the governor's phone. It was a direct line. And the phone rang one day, and I picked it up and said, Jim, can you come over and see me quickly? So I hightailed it over to the governor's office and went through the side door, and there was Happy sitting there. And he said, I want you to take care of Governor Chandler. I said, well, Governor, what does it mean, take care? You'll know what to do. Well, what that meant was that he had an office next to mine. He had 2 people that were part of his, what I call, battalion of security around him. And people that wanted jobs in administration that were supporters of his would come through him, and my job was to sort out and make sure that it went through the system properly, and the ones that didn't work. So one day he came in, he said, I'm going to give you the best advice that I've ever given any young person. He said, you will understand when people start making negative comments about you, that what you've got to do is learn how to take all your clothes off. Let all that crap slop all over you. Get a big old terry cloth towel. Wipe yourself off. Put your clothes on and go on. So in other words, don't worry about what anybody says. Don't worry about what anybody throws at you. Don't worry about anything other than the fact that only you know what the truth is. You cannot unsay a cruel word. So if you think about these days of the internet, how many times have people sent stuff out by the internet and say, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. How many times have Twitter, things going out, oh, I wish that hadn't happened, and it's all public, which means that every path has a few puddles. Every path has a few puddles. Just make sure that you don't wade in those puddles, and make sure that you don't cause the puddles on your own initiative. And when you wallow with pigs, expect to get dirty. When you wallow with pigs, expect to get dirty. Most of the stuff people worry about ain't never going to happen anyway. Most of the stuff people worry about ain't going to happen anyway. Remember that silence is sometimes the best answer. Live a good and honorable life. Then when you get older and think back, you'll enjoy it a second time. Don't interfere with something that ain't bothering you none. How many times have you gotten involved with something just because you wanted to get involved, and it wasn't anything you should have gotten involved in to begin with, and all at once you're in the middle of something that you say, I should have got, why did I do that? Think about that lesson. Treat others like you'd like to be treated. I've always, all my life, treated everyone like I'd like to be treated. And if you do that, it'll come back to you, and you'll say, well, I did that, but they still treat me bad. Doesn't make any difference. Treat others like you'd like to be treated. Biggest thing that my wife and I have continually commented about, she says, I don't understand how you and why you turn the other cheek. And I say, because it's easier to do that and not worry about it than it is to get embroiled and then be regretful of something I've said or done. Reminds me of a story about here's old age at its best. Russ and Sam, two friends, met in the park every day to feed the pigeons, watch the squirrels, and discuss the world's problems. One day Russ didn't show up, and Sam didn't think much about it and figured that maybe he had a cold or something, and that after Russ hadn't shown up for a week or so, Sam really got worried. However, since the only time they ever got together was at the park, Sam didn't know where Russ lived, so he was able to find out what happened to him, and a month passed. And Sam figured he'd seen the last of Russ. But one day, Sam approached the park, and lo and behold, there sat Russ. Sam was very excited and happy to see him and told him so, and he said, for crying out loud, Russ, what in the world happened to you? Russ said, I've been in jail. Jail? What in the world for? Well, Russ said, you know Sue, that cute little blonde waitress at the coffee shop where sometimes I go? Yeah, I remember her. What about her? Well, one day she filed rape charges against me. And at 89 years old, I was so proud when I got to go to court, I pled guilty. And the judge gave me 30 days for perjury. So the point is, find humor in every single day that you live. Now, Albert Einstein said, I have no special talent, but I'm passionately curious. So I end up in 1959 playing pro baseball for a year. I came back to, I blew my arm out one night in double-A ball, and they didn't know how to fix it. Sent me to Johns Hopkins, full of cortisone, and didn't have the Tommy John surgery in those years. And so my pro baseball career was finished. And so I came back, became a play-by-play high school announcer for WFKY in Frankfort. Was a salesperson at WFKY, Then Garvis Kincaid, who was a big entrepreneur person, founded Central Bank, Kentucky Central Insurance, a string of radio stations, television stations. Gray Communications today is what Garvis Kincaid started. Heard me, and so he called me. Now I'm 21 years old, and he calls me and he said, "You're pretty good on the air." He said, "Why don't you come take over the color analysis for the UK network?" And in those years there were 5 different originations. And so I became a color analyst in the middle of football season, with a play-by-play guy being D. Huddleston, who became a United States Senator. And I started doing radio disc jockey work at WVLK and sales work. I was the evening disc jockey and the first stand-up radio board doing top 50. And you know who the afternoon disc jockey was? Hal Rogers, who is now the 5th District Congressman and the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee of the House of Representatives. And so then we started the Kentucky Central Network, and in 21 I put together the first statewide network that UK had, and that's how the business started. After 3 years of that, I said, I got to have some sales and marketing experience. So I went to Cincinnati and interviewed with Procter & Gamble, and they said, "Nobody comes in off the street like you. Why are you here?" And I said, "Because I want to work for you. Forbes says you're one of the top managed companies in the United States." So they hired me. They sent me to Chattanooga, my first test. Chattanooga had the worst sales territory in the United States of America for P&G. They were 3rd in 3 areas of soap sales, to Lever and to Colgate. P&G was 3rd because there was a huge operation called Dixie Savings Stores that was a Jewish group that didn't like anybody from P&G, and therefore nobody had been able to penetrate them. And the guy who I succeeded had committed suicide, and it stuck a pipe up his. Now that's where I started. Okay, but they sent me to the worst territory in the country. 2 years later, I led the country in sales increase, and went to Washington, D.C. to become district head salesman. And then they were promoting me again to Philadelphia. I didn't want to go further north, so I came back to Lexington and started my own real estate and insurance business. I'm still a licensed real estate broker. I still take my test. I still take because I've always figured at age 76, if things go bad for me, I can always go back and sell real estate. And I'm still a licensed life insurance agent, still a licensed fire and casualty agent, and I still read everything on that, so I can figure that I can use that knowledge to help in whatever else I'm doing. So I read incessantly. Every solitary thing has to do with insurance or with real estate. I also built over a couple hundred houses in the middle 60s. And then a group called me and said, "You need to get involved in politics." Well, here I am. I'm a registered Democrat only because I loved Happy, because Happy used to come see me pitch at baseball. And I had no political background. So in 1966, I ran Senator Cooper's campaign for the Senate when I was in my mid-20s. And in 67, got involved in Governor Nunn's campaign for the governorship, became the first member of his cabinet, ran for lieutenant governor in 1971, and I was going to do it the right way. I wasn't going to take any campaign contributions. I was going to use all the savings for the business that I had built. Think about this, I had $250,000 in savings. That's a lot of money then. And I had put together with houses and real estate and stuff. Sold all those businesses, going to have no conflicts. Go to Frankfurt, man, I'm going to do it the right way. I got my rear end handed to me. I got beat by Julian Carroll so bad that it may have been the worst defeat in the history of the state. And so I came out, and think about this, at $107 in the bank. I owed $76,887 for the campaign, and I had no job. Had no job. I went to the barbershop. It's still up here, Ray's Barbershop, which is up on Walton Avenue, right up the street, close to the old Henry Clay High School, right across the street. Letters on the window are the same as they were then in 1964, or 1971. And I went in and sat down in the barber's chair, and he said, "I bet you need some help." And I said, "Oh my God, do I?" And he said, "Well, there's an empty apartment upstairs. Why don't you take that apartment, no rent for a month?" And I said, "Only if I can use your phone." And the pay phone is on the wall. And I said, "Can I get the number off the phone? That'll be my first business number." All right, so I go upstairs, I move and I still have this desk, which is revered by me, obviously. And I took this desk upstairs, and 2 steel case file cabinets, and a light bulb hanging from the ceiling, and no blinds on the windows, and bare floors, and a wash basin that had a stem area on it, and claw feet on a bathtub. That was what my first office was that started my company. And again, this is my first wife, understand. And I'd never tell her how bad it was. I never did anything but express extreme optimism for every single day. I refused to accept the fact that defeat was inevitable. And I knew that if I worked hard enough, I could make something happen. Now, that was the premise that I worked on. I had no plan. I had no business plan. I had no idea about a business plan. I took a blank sheet of paper and ruled it down the middle. And I still do that with mentoring I do for a lot of young people. And I say, "All right, what's your assets? And what's your credits and what's your deficits?" Lots of times there's more deficits than there are assets. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about what do you know? What are you really good at? And so on. So I put down, I said, I'm pretty good at sports. Pretty good at really understanding college sports. And I'm really good at tourism. Why? Because I had run the state cabinet of tourism for 4 years in parks. And I really understood cost of food and beverage. I really understood the restaurant business. I really got to understand all that. So I put down, I said, "Oh, really good. Well, then what should I do?" Well, you know what? Lexington Tourist and Convention Bureau may be in need of an executive director because they had just passed a room tax. So guess what? Within 2 weeks, I'm the first executive director of the Tourist and Convention Commission, except that the mayor and the county judge came to see me, and they said, "We'd like to hire you. How much does it pay? $18,000 a year. Do I get a car? Yeah. Do I get a secretary? Yep. Do I get an office? Yep. Guess what? You can hire my company. And you can hire my company for 6 months, and you pay me a $1,500 a month retainer, and I'll pay all the expenses. I get to do other stuff, and I'm not doing the kind of job for you in 6 months, then by golly, you can fire me." Well, they thought they'd found a mother lode. Because, first of all, it was going to be cheaper for them, better, and I was driven to make sure that that succeeded. From that first meeting, from that first meeting, we had the first meeting in the convention bureau. They said, "Now we're going to tell you why we hired you." The railroad tracks were running up Vine Street. That was the station. Urban Renewal had come into town, and it had totally changed the confirmation. But part of the urban renewal process for the in-kind the city was getting of 25% was you had to build a convention center down at the end. And at that point, there was a hole in the wall, or a hole in the ground. And they said, if we don't get a definite plan for urban renewal within a year, then we've got to pay $3 million back to the feds. And we don't have the $3 million. I said, "Oh, I understand why you hired me." And so my second client became the Lexington Center Corporation with another $1,500 a month that I put together the game plan, and that's how Rupp Arena got built. I was the first executive director of Rupp Arena. I was the first executive director of Lexington Center Corporation and the first executive director of the Tourist and Convention Bureau. And then, in the meantime, I get a call from the university. And a guy that was there that worked for me at WFKY in Frankfurt who said, "Jim, you don't understand how to put together networks. You put together the Kentucky Central Network. We've got our rights coming up on UK. What about you putting together a UK network for us, except you got to bid on it? How much did the previous guy pay? $44,000. Is he going to bid again? Yeah, it's a New York firm. We'd rather have it as a Kentucky firm. So we're going to put an RFP out, and we hope you answer it. So I bid $51,817. We're going to say, where'd that number come from? Well, it wasn't based on any kind of pro forma. It was based on the fact that I'm figuring that if he knows I'm bidding, he's going to think 50,000, so I'm going to go a little bit over that to beat him. That was my thought process. Well, guess what? I got it. Now, all at once, I got the UK rights. I got no sales force. I'm running the Tourist and Convention Bureau. I'm running Lexington Center Corporation. And so I hire my first employee. Then I hire my second employee. And I'm paying them with that, and I'm out on the risk. And then I go back to the banker. Remember me telling you about the banker that I owed $76,817, or whatever the total was with interest. His name was Jake Graves, and he was the Second National Bank. And when I walked in to see him to begin with, he said, "Partner," and he had old lace-top boots, old farmer, stick pin in his shirt, tie, guy that wore an old Homburg hat. Just visualize all of this. And farm that had been handed down to him for all kinds of time. And he said, he pulled his desk drawer, think about this now, pulled his desk drawer out and he said, "You know what, young man, I think you're going to make it." And he said, "But there's no way you can make it without some capital." And he said, "You've got no capital." And he said, "So I'm going to advance you $10,000 right now." He took out there's no computers now, so you've got these old deposit books that had carbon paper in it. And he flipped open that book and he filled it out for $10,000. He said, "Now take this, put in your account, and there's no interest due for 6 months. It doesn't mean you don't have to pay interest, but there's no interest due for 6 months." And he said, "Now, I got one thing I want back from you. Think about what I told you a little bit earlier." He said, "I want on my desk every Friday, what's the 5 most important things you accomplished during the week? And what's the 5 most important things you're going to do next week?" And he said, "That has to be on my desk every Friday. If you're not, I'm going to call it over." And now, there's somebody that took an interest in me. There's somebody that did something for me. Now, fast forward. We're at the Final Four. I'm now doing all the NCAA stuff, all the NCAA rights, all corporate marketing rights, all programs, all radio, everything for the NCAA. And we're at the Final Four in Seattle. I take him to the Final Four. And I introduce him to everybody, that's anybody and all this stuff. And once a year, Pat and I have dinner with he and Glenna. He's in his late 80s, and his wife. And each day I give praise to him for having had the faith in me, to having given me an opportunity then. So the point of this whole story is never forget those that have done something for you. Never forget those that help you along the way. Never forget those that have given you the opportunity to be able to succeed in life, and never shy away from the fact of trying to do the same thing yourself as relates to all other people. Now, I'm running for Lieutenant Governor, get beat, start the business, and then now I'm at the Final Four. UK has now gone to the Final Four. How ironic is this? 1974-75 is my first year doing UK. And I'm sitting with the UK network, and I'm saving money because I'm producing, I'm engineering, I'm keeping stats, and Kaywood Ledford and Ralph Hacker are the team that are doing the games. And I'm sitting next to the Mutual Network, which is doing the NCAA broadcast nationwide. And I'm thinking, you know what, I know we can do this better than them, and I don't even know how good they're doing it. But I just know we can do it better. But I also know that they're not collecting the rights fees properly at each of the sites. Now, that's too complicated for me to explain to you, but I know. So, on Monday prior to the final game, and this is when UCLA is playing Kentucky and John Wooden has announced his retirement. And that's because he saw the handwriting on the wall that he wasn't going to be competitive going forward. And so he announced his retirement on Saturday in front of the press. Nobody knew it was coming. So he's got an incentive to beat Kentucky. They're playing, this is Kevin Gravy, this is Jimmy Dan Connor, this is what I thought was one of the really great teams that Kentucky's had, and should have won the game. Got beat, And I'm in the middle of the floor with the top two guys from the NCAA, and I said, how much is Mutual paying you for the radio rights? Think about this. Entrepreneurial. And they said, $3,000. Well, I said, I'm paying more for Kentucky's rights than they're paying, $7,000. And I said, how much are you getting from all the rights fees that people like me pay for doing local originations? They said 21,000. 21,000 and 7 is 28. And I said, have you got people assigned to work on this during the year? Yeah, we have 2 people that are full-time staffers. I tell you what I'll do. I'll give you $30,000 guaranteed. I'll take over all the responsibility, all the work, clear all the stations, do every solitary thing that's needed to do. And they said, will you guarantee that? Yeah. Will you put a bond up? Oh, yeah. Well, I have the ability to guarantee $30,000. I have $30,000. I am putting net worth of $30,000. Yeah, I will. All right? So the next Monday, Walter Byers, who was a longtime czar of the NCAA, calls me and says, host. He always called me my last name, and I hate somebody calling me my last name. Host. Be in my office Monday morning at 9 o'clock. So 9 o'clock, I'm in his office in Kansas City, and he looked at me, and he had long sideburns. He had the worst toupee in the United States. And he had long sideburns, wore cowboy boots. Still to this day, the smartest single individual that ever been around. I've been in the White House, Oval Office of every single president since Nixon. And he's the only person in my life I've ever been in awe of. I've never been in awe of anybody other than this one person, because his mind was better than anybody I've ever been around. He knew more about my business than I knew. He had a wandering eye. I don't mean it sexually. I mean, he just had one of those. He had one of those. He had one of those lazy eyes. That's a better way to say it. Wandering eye. Lazy, had a lazy eye. Find humor in every day. He had a lazy eye, and so when he looked at you, you didn't know really what he was thinking or what he was doing. So anyway, he took a chance on me, and then I went back to the banker. And I said, I need a letter of credit. Well, I've already helped you. I said, no, Jake, but I've got a chance. So I got the letter of credit from the bank. And the rest of the story of the company is history. We became the nation's largest college sports marketing company and built a pretty enviable business. And then separately in the tourism industry, we built the National Tourist Association into the largest industry-wide group travel organization in North America. It still operates here as NTA. It's located off of Man of War. And those 2 areas, I was fortunate enough to be inducted into the College Basketball Hall of Fame last year as the first person ever to go in the College Basketball Hall of Fame in marketing, and I was the 39th person in the Travel Industry Hall of Fame about 15 years ago. So I give you all that kind of background to tell you that if you have the right substance, if you get up every day in a positive vein, if you have the right attitude, if you treat others the way you'd like to be treated. I was a 2.4 student, guys. I was a 2.4 student. I cared more about playing baseball than I did about work and school. I loved, however, the labs of the radio communications department, because I loved being on the air, and I loved being able to spin records, and I loved, the background and the history of communications and so on. So I really got something out of my college experience. It took me 7 semesters to pass Spanish. 4 times. I flunked it 3 times. So it took me 7, because you had to have 2 years of Spanish, a foreign language, to get a degree in liberal arts, which was my undergraduate degree. So I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but learn how to connect dots. If you understand all the experiences you experience in life, always keep track of all the people. I keep track on it, and you'll die when you hear this one, in the day of computers. I keep track still on a legal pad of all people. So all people in various categories. whether it's the arena, whether it's college sports, whether it's travel, what it is, keep track, keep track, keep track, keep score, and all at once you connect a dot. Here's a dot I connect to this, here's a dot that connects to that, here's a dot that makes things work, and the ability you have as an entrepreneur to connect dots is what will cause you to ultimately succeed. Now I want to spend a couple minutes on the KFC Yum Center, and then I'll open it up for questions. There's been a lot of conversation recently, continues to be, in Louisville about the bond financial aspect of the KFC Yum Center. Here are the facts. When the KFC Yum Center financing package was put together, first of all, I drove every day from Lexington, got up at 4, left the house at 4:45, was at the Marriott downtown, starting in 2005 until it was opened in 2010 in October. May of 2005 to October of 2010. I drove every day, sometimes Saturdays. And sat at my office was a table in the lobby of the Marriott. And I walked to the site every day. I never turned in a first expense account. I wouldn't allow any member of the board to do it. And I wouldn't allow a vendor to buy me a meal. So therefore, I wanted to be totally, completely, so transparent and above board on what was going to be the highest profile thing done in Louisville in many years, that it had to be totally above any area of particular suspicion in any way, shape, or form. I had developers offer me, well, we want to send a plane for you and take you to the U.S. Open. Thank you very much. I want to take you to this, I want to take you to that. And I refused every trip, everything, and including the night when the bond issue was signed and the check was given. Mortensen wanted to put a dinner on, who's the thing, and I went in the back room and paid the bill for the dinner of all of the people that were there personally, so that I could honestly say that nobody ever paid a solitary single expense. Now, it cost me a huge amount in terms of financial resources, money that I didn't necessarily have, but I had, and I've operated that way pretty much all my life, with people money necessarily didn't have, but I've always found it, figured it out, and gone on. So when we put the financing plan together, the first plan had to do with a variable rate thing, and those prior to the crash that caused the Great Recession, you had all kinds of variable rate deals that were out there. And so we had hired Goldman Sachs, and through them had worked with a number of financial entities to try to figure out the best way to finance the arena, most inexpensive way to finance it. So I had signed 456 documents in July 22nd of 2008. 456 documents had pre-priced the variable rate bond issue. We had done a small part of fixed rate bonds, but the vast majority were variable rate bonds. And I was driving home, and we were going to close it the next day. I'm driving home, and I'm pulling in my garage here. And I never stayed overnight in Louisville. I drove back and forth every day. Think about the chances of this. Never hit a deer. All right? Never had an accident. Never got stopped for speeding. Never took a drink before I drove. And never got stopped. So the good Lord was looking over me, because the chances of me going back and forth every day for 6 years, especially with the construction on the interstate, was next to none. So I lost my damn train of thought. Garage, right. The garage was, that's what happens when you start to get, you all understand that. Anyway, garage door was pulling up, and my phone went off, and it was the head guy from Goldman Sachs. He said, Jim, Assured Financial Services. Assured is the AAA insurer who is insuring the bonds. What does that mean? It means that this is a revenue bond issue which is not guaranteed by the state and it's not guaranteed by the city. It is only guaranteed by the AAA insurer, which means that if anything ever happens to the arena and the arena were to go bankrupt or anything else, taxpayers don't pick it up. State doesn't pick it up. City doesn't pick it up. Assured has to pick it up because we paid for that insurance for that to be the case. And I had to do that in order to assure the city and the state that it would not incur any indebtedness. So it's not part of the debt service that the state has that they're responsible for in any way, shape, or form. That's number one. So the garage door is going up, and the guy on the other phone at Goldman Sachs says, Assured Financial Services just got put on credit watch. I said, what's that mean? It means a variable rate bond issue that you had a credit spread of 5. It's ballooned to 200. I said, well, that blows it out of the water. And he said, yeah. And then he said, what are you going to do? He said, you've got your life in this since 2005. What are you going to do? Now, he's got a $1.7 million fee at risk, all right? And he says, what are you going to do? You know what my answer was? I said, you know what? I'm going to go in the house, and I'll probably have a bourbon and water, maybe 2. And then I'm going to go to bed, and then I'm going to start over again in the morning. And I'm going to figure it out. So the next morning, I get up even earlier, and I drive to Louisville, and on the way I call the governor, I call the mayor, and I said, the deal's off today, told them exactly the truth and why. And they said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to figure it out. And I said, but I'll tell you one thing, we've got to do something in the next 30 days because the market's going to crash after Labor Day in 2008. And it did. And I said, and he said, how do you know that? And I said, because I read Financial Times, I read Barron's Overseas, I read all of this stuff, and it was already happening there. And I'm an incessant reader. I read a lot of stuff. And so I said, it's going to happen here, and I've got to figure it out. And they said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to figure it out. So I was determined it had to be a fixed rate issue. I was determined if we did a fixed rate issue, it would be another probably $100, $115 million in debt service because of the difference in the rate structure. That would allow us then, if you understand anything about this, and I know some of you do, we had a cap on what the bond rating agencies are doing of $1.1 billion of revenue that we forecast, and gave us a cap of $700 million against that $1.1 billion. And now with the new rate issue, it caused us to go to $730 million as opposed to being under that. That meant there was $30 million worth of taxable bonds that were junk bonds. So Goldman wasn't going to take those. Nobody wanted to take them. So I went to a guy, and again, connecting dots. There was a guy with Hilliard Lyons who had run my campaign in Bowling Green, Pete Mahiran, who is a strong, ardent Democrat, one of Warren Buffett's best friends, who's also a close friend of mine, and I'm Republican. And he said, and I called him and I said, I've got something I want to talk to you about. Jim, what is it? And if you know Pete, that's exactly the way he would sound. And so he came to listen, and he said, how can you assure me this is going to work? And I said, Pete, all I can tell you is that it's going to have 100,000% attention from me till I know it works. He said, that's all I need. Hilliard bought $30 million worth of taxable bonds when they were junk. Now, as we ended up structuring it, only $9 million of those were junk because we were able to get the other $25 million in the set because of the way that we were able to drive the interest rates. And that was with the next story I'm going to tell you. Then I go make a presentation to a huge group of people in Louisville through Hilliard. Then I call Goldman Sachs. This is the middle of August. And I said, I'm ready to close. Close what? Close the deal. Well, how are you going to do it? I told them. Well, how'd you do that? And I told them. And they said, well, I said, and I want to close it before the end of the month. And they said, well, we can't. And I said, why? Because we go to the Hamptons. And I said, the name of my book is going to be They Went to the Hamptons. And I said, and the other guy on the other end of the phone, who's still the #1 guy for Goldman and all municipal bond issues, said, Jim, you wouldn't do that. I said, yeah, I would. I said, now, I'm just saying to you, you got one of two choices. You can either put a skeleton force to work, and in my view, it'll be better for us because there's no other bond issues out if everybody goes to the Hamptons. Therefore, we got a chance to sell something that makes sense before the market crashes. So guess what? We had, for the $349 million in bonds, we had $1.1 billion of interest, which meant we drove the issue down by $6 million, and then put that $6 million into a separate reserve fund, which is why we made it through all the stuff we made through. That's about as simple as I can state it to you. And so the bond issue was done. Thank God to Hilliard. We closed it on August the 28th, announced it after Labor Day, and on September the 7th, the market crashed. So if you really think about all that, now the thing is getting done, and the development started, and now so that you understand the financing part of this, there is assured financial services that guarantees that the bonds are always going to be good. There is a $15.9 million in debt service reserve that has never been touched. Never been touched.
Did you say 15 or 50?
$15.9 million in debt service reserve that has never been touched. All right? On top of that, because of the fact that the way the TIF was put together, it was put together in a 6 square mile area. Outside of 2 square miles of downtown, you've got a lot of other stuff that was business development, mobile-only lumber, for example. They left that area, so we established a benchmark in 2005 of the TIF district, and the way the TIF works is that in order for